July 21st, 2021. And I have 11:02. My clock might be a minute fast, but we're on time. And let's do a roll call.
Thank you. Vice Chair Robert Burnham.
Here.
Nick Kuntz.
Here.
Michael Rassler.
Here.
Barbara Silver.
Here.
Suzanne Tejada.
Here.
Council Member Megan Harmon.
Here.
Brian Demore, City Engineer, ADA Coordinator.
Here.
Raquel Becerra, Acting Supervisor.
Here.
Thank you.
And Miss King as well. Yes.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Before we get to our main item, we do have public comment. Any member of the public may address the Access Advisory Committee for up to 5 minutes on any subject within the jurisdiction of the Access Advisory Committee that is not scheduled for a public discussion before the committee. Have we received any speaker slips, Sarita?
I see Accessible Santa Barbara and Nancy Capone. Accessible Santa Barbara has raised his hand. I will allow Accessible Santa Barbara to speak, but let me advance the slide one moment. Just got to do this. Slide 2. And stop the slide. Stop it. Accessible Santa Barbara, you may now speak.
Good morning.
Morning, Will.
Good morning, everybody. This is Will Railing, and this is the time for general public comment for things that aren't on the agenda. And I have a little bit of a dilemma because I just learned of this meeting yesterday. I see that it was properly noticed. I just somehow didn't know about it myself. So no complaints there, but I do have something else at 11:30. And if the public comment on the one agenda item goes forward before 11:30, I'll be able to make a public comment. And I think I'll try to do that and we'll just see. And if that doesn't happen, if public comment doesn't happen until after 11:30, I'll have to, I guess, make my remarks to the city council. And I'll just say I do have some concerns, especially regarding the sections on the board makeup. And I guess it would be inappropriate for me to say more during this part of the meeting. So thank you very, very much. I appreciate it and look forward to hearing the next half hour. Thank you.
Thanks, Will. Nancy?
Nancy Capone, if you'd like to speak, please raise your hand.
Okay, is that it then for public comment?
That is it. Thank you.
Okay, then let's move on to item number 4, and that is that the Access Advisory Committee review and provide comments on the proposed revisions to the City of Santa Barbara resolution for the Access Advisory Committee. Let me start with initial comments. I wanted to thank Brian for all your work on helping me with these final drafts, and also Barbara for all your input. Nick, I think you had some too. Seems
Yes,
like
thank you.
some of you weighed in on certain parts. This has been a work in progress for several years, actually, and I wanted to thank everyone, including Mr. Railing, for giving me some advice on wording, especially in, I believe, section 2. With that said, I'd like to, I'll save my comments regarding the resolution proper after everyone else on the committee has weighed in.
And Vice Chair Barnum, if it's okay, I'd like to just kind of put some context into this and what we were thinking we would do. is just kind of walk through this, this draft that we have in place right now, and then receive the comments and any questions on that. But we did provide this in advance, so hopefully the committee members who are on here today have had a chance to review it. And it has been, like you said, it's been a work in progress for a number of years. I think it was early in Council Member Harmon's appointment to the council way back that we met and kind of got going on this effort.
Yes.
And it's been a while. But I think it's been a good process. It's been we've had good conversations that have come up out of this. And what's in front of you is not necessarily what has to be the final version. It's what I think represents what we've talked about and developed over the years. I think there's still probably some areas where we wanted to have discussion with this full board. We've been working with a subcommittee to get it to this place, but we wanted to bring it to the full board or to the full Access Advisory Committee before taking it to the council. And what I'm kind of thinking next steps are going to be, hopefully we'll get really close to a consensus. Ideally, we get a full consensus today on the language. And then when I go to council, my plan is to go to council on August 17th with the ADA coordinator's annual report. And in that report, I will talk about this effort that we've gone through and that I'm planning to come at the next council meeting with the resolution. So to kind of warm up council to the fact that that's coming, it'll probably just be on consent because I will have already talked about it on August 17th. Council goes dark for a few weeks, so it wouldn't be until I think September 7th, or is it the 14th? I'm not remembering. I know there's a few council meetings that are canceled after the 17th, but it would be that first meeting in September when this resolution would go to update for the Access Advisory Committee.
Would expand.
So any questions on kind of the process before we jump in and start to look through what we have for this resolution?
Brian, just a quick question. You'd like us to come to a consensus and basically approve by a motion of this committee this draft moving forward toward a presentation to City Council?
Right. That is correct. That's what I would like to see out of this today is a motion and a consensus. And it may be that the committee approves or is in agreement with the resolution as presented. It could be with the following, if based on the discussion, there are some recommended changes, the motion could include that in it. But that's what I would hope we would get out of today's meeting.
Quick question, if I may. Do we need a motion at this point to have, in a second, to have discussion on the draft, or are you, accepting any comments or suggested edits without a motion?
I was anticipating we would have a discussion. My view of this meeting was we would just kind of walk through the resolution. And Ms. King, are you able to pull that up on the screen? Because the idea is we could just kind of go through it top to bottom, and as people have questions or comments that could.
Right, Brian, this is Barbara. The full committee will be meeting again in August. So it isn't like this is our last shot at this. This is a special meeting to consider just this.
Right.
That is right. And that was something that I had looked at this morning, is if there are a few little things that still need to get worked on, we have that opportunity before we take it to council at the next regularly scheduled AAC meeting. Yes, that's a good reminder. So
I pulled the reso.
we've got that up on the screen.
Yes.
Okay, so I think we just kind of walk through this, and as what I think will work best is as committee members have questions or comments, we'll just kind of work our way through it. And I would like to try to have Mr. Railing provide his comment before he has to leave. So I don't remember which section he said he had his comment in, but let's keep an eye on the time and try to make sure that he's able to do that before signing off.
I think it was section 7,
So-
board makeup.
Okay. So if it looks like we need to jump ahead at some point to get to that, I think we should do that.
Brian, this is Bob. I just have a real quick comment in the last whereas clause. I believe the wording was reversed. I believe it should be access. I think it says advisory access committee, and it should be access advisory committee on the last whereas clause before it goes into the resolve.
Mr. Burnham, that will be fixed. And there was also, I know that Ms. Silver had noted
Number 18.
yeah, / that was misplaced. So those two have been noted and have been corrected. Or
Good.
will be corrected.
Before we go into
Thank you,
details-
Sarita.
Before we go into details, I have a quick question just about the general process here for editing. Is there any sort of ability to audit the editing via like red lines so we know exactly what has changed? I know what we were trying to achieve, and I've noticed a couple of things that I think were not intended, and it gives me pause and wondering what I might have missed, like that typo. So if there is a possibility to see the progression, the history of edits, I know Word allows that. If it's turned on, I don't know if we've done that in this case.
I'm not sure that we're able to do that with this version. I know we probably have, I mean, we obviously have the existing version, and then we've got this. I don't know, like the intermediate versions, how many of those are saved and available. We can certainly, well, I think, Sarita King, do you know what kind of history we have on the versioning with this particular document?
You know, I've been saving the versions from each of the ad hoc committee meetings that we've had. So each time we've met there, you know, I've had those versions. I've had versions that have been received from the various ad hoc committee members. There are probably, you know, anywhere from 8 to a dozen versions, and this goes back 3 years, so some of them predate me.
Yeah. Okay, so but yeah, versioning was not turned on, so that answers my question. I'll just have to do a side by side, or there's actually also
There's different iterations of it, let's just say.
yeah, I guess what my biggest concern is what's the difference between the final product and what is standing today, and I can use technology to do a comparison word for word and see what all has changed. Let's move on with
What we can do is at least make sure anything that changes from what was shared with the committee as part of this agenda, we can make sure any changes that are made for the version that we plan to take to council, we can present that when we go to when we have our regular AAC meeting in August.
Brian,
So
thank
you'll
you.
at least be
This
able
is
to see
Barbara.
those.
That would be really helpful because all of us have experience with our own online editing where things disappear that we didn't know and things do appear that we hadn't planned. So that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Mhm.
And,
Anything else in the whereas section?
or the resolve? Did anyone have any questions? A lot of this is from the standing, the resolution 08095. I think we just added a couple of new clauses to make the committee's scope more inclusive of what our purpose is going into the resolve clauses. So
Okay, section 1 should be fairly straightforward. I don't know if there are any questions
Yes.
on that.
I think section 2 is really important as far as really broadening the purpose, emphasizing the proactivity of the committee. And so if anyone has any questions.
If we could just scroll down onto the top of that page too.
I also want to be sensitive to Mr. Railing before he has to leave to include your comments.
I had a question regarding E, monitoring compliance. What does that mean? Monitoring. Like, what does that?
Suzanne, here's what it meant to me. First, I
Okay.
was resistant to it because I didn't see how a committee like ours could possibly monitor all of that or keep track of it. What we can ask for are systems that will, because that's one of the problems this committee has had, is getting statistics or any kind of feedback or any kind of accountability on any of these issues. So in the end, I was okay with monitoring, meaning we don't do it ourselves, but we can speak to the need for it on any subject that comes before us.
Thank you, Barbara. Yeah.
Just an aside, I think it was Nick, who did like literally a walking tour of the different parklets. At one point a few months ago, literally to personally monitor compliance with the guidelines. That is a way we could do that, but we're not set up or organized or have any authority other than what we do on our own and then report back in. So I tend to agree with Barbara that while there's been some experience anecdotally, of providing input, on compliance, there really needs to be a city body or a city professional or employee that has responsibility and accountability for that, which certainly the committee does not have.
Yeah, Michael, thank you. I actually reviewed the parklets a half a dozen times.
Yep.
And most recently after seeing the, well, I guess I don't want to go into too much detail on this. It's a little out of scope, but I agree with Barbara that we need to be monitoring from a higher level than that, boots on the ground. It's not our job. And I deeply resent having to be the boots on the ground, going out and underscoring these problems. But unfortunately, because of the lack of staffing allocated to do the monitoring, if I'm not out there showing staff or council, they're blind to it. So we need to work on that. I'm glad to have monitoring in here, so we can do it at a higher level, and hopefully we can get support from staff and council to get more staff funding to do it at a low level, boots on the ground.
And maybe it's oversight of monitoring compliance or something like that for our committee. Just an idea that thought to me as you were talking there, Nick, and I agree. You or no member of the committee should be doing that, but there are, and I forget if it's the folks in the yellow shirts or maybe red shirts that are now on the streets, helping in a variety of ways, kind of like community ambassadors, whether it's with the homeless or with tourists, a whole variety of functions that those folks provide. Is there a way to add monitoring compliance to what they are doing every day when they are on the streets, walking up and down State Street and elsewhere throughout Santa Barbara? They're already there. There are boots on the ground, and that's what made me think of it, Nick. There are boots on the ground that the city is paying for. Why not just ask them, for an eyeball check, and they once a month, report on what they've seen, unless something is, glaring and, merits an immediate report. Those folks are out there. Is there a way to take advantage of those existing boots on the ground?
I think we can continue to look into that, and allowing for this section E here, monitoring compliance is kind of a foundation for that, in my opinion, to move forward with looking for solutions like that.
This is Barbara again, and the other thing that I thought it enabled was for us to have to comment on it in our annual report, so that we can either have statistics or articulate a need for certain things to be monitored, and ask for the assignment of staff to do it.
So I agree that staff should be responsible. A paid employee of the city should be responsible for monitoring. I just brought this up because I felt like it was misleading that it puts that responsibility to this committee, which, as we agree, it should not be our responsibility to monitor, but we provide oversight. I just thought that was misleading. The text, the wording was misleading as to in terms of our responsibility.
Can you suggest some other wording, Suzanne?
I think somebody mentioned oversight, or
I had mentioned oversight of the monitoring,
yes.
and we could provide oversight to the monitoring process for
Yeah.
compliance with the codes. However, then we need, who is it that we would be providing oversight to, which is why we need those boots on the ground, whoever they may be.
Right, and that requires statistics and data, right, to monitor, right? Because we're not going to be going out there and taking the inventories necessarily. So that.
But we can identify the inventories that should be kept.
I mean, yes, and this is sort of, we don't have a specific position to refer to, but I think maybe we just add oversight of monitoring compliance, maybe in this resolution.
Thank you. That certainly is an improvement.
Providing oversight of monitoring. Yeah, I agree. Thank you, Barbara and Suzanne.
Yeah, we don't have it defined yet, but this would, yeah. Okay, that's what I would suggest.
Okay. Mr. Railing, would you like to give your public comment now before you have to leave?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. And I hope this is just now the public comment period, not just for me, of course, and I do just think it's always a question and an issue for each committee the city has when, every agenda item has to have public comment, but there's no specificity as to when during the item it has to be. And different committees tend to come down in different ways. Some have the public comment on the earlier side, some later. It's hard to find a sweet spot. So I appreciate that's something that you're always dealing with. I think ideally the public gets at least a presentation on the item before public comment is called, but then on the other hand, the public gets to, it's not too late. and sometimes in the AAC, a couple times this has happened where you have a full discussion of an item, and at the very end call for public comment, where you just, as a member of the public, you don't really feel like you're meaningfully contributing because the discussion is essentially done. So this seems like as good a time as any. So I'll just fire away. Thank you for accommodating the schedule. And the concern that prompted my comment about, like, I want to maybe even mention it to City Council, was section 9. But since you're letting me talk, I'll just go through in order with a few other things. I think globally, it's a great document. I think it's a good way to look at it is look at things that are mandatory and then look at things that are like just aspirational. And they're both important. And I love the aspirational stuff. The whereas clauses are really helpful, giving the history, and are also somewhat aspirational in terms of the last 3, giving the purpose of the goal of council for the AAC. Taking the sections itself through in order. Section 1, I can tell you, it says that this resolution amends and supersedes the previous resolution. So you definitely want somebody in the future wanting to understand the AAC, that they'll only need to look at the new resolution, right? The 2021 resolution. They won't need to sort of grab both resolutions and make sure you're, reconciling them. And and just in terms of an edit that maybe the city attorney will advise on, saying that this resolution amends and supersedes the provisions of the 2008 resolution. I can tell you that it's much more common when a resolution that the city council will have a section that just rescinds the earlier resolution. So it's clear that you only need to look at the one resolution, the current one, and I love, like, I did pitch in a little, I think, in finding some great language in some other cities for the aspirational section 2. And I do think it looks great, and it definitely gives people the opportunity. It's almost an outline for future agenda items, and it's just great. Section 5 is the one that's really mandatory, that 51% of the committee members shall, that's always mandatory when you use the word shall be people with disabilities. And that's important, okay? And so in light of section 5 being mandatory, I don't really, it's fine that section 6 and section 7 are aspirational. Section 6 talking about, specific code knowledge that are desirable and recommended, and section 7 talking about people having the following backgrounds: members of the disability community, architectural engineering community, and members at large. Now, I think in the past it's been more of a quota system, and I think you only need to have a quota if you're concerned that the committee could get out of balance. Since the mandatory section 5 requires 51% of the committee members to be people with disabilities, I'm not personally so worried about the dispensing with the hard quotas for, other groups. And I think it does make the application process simpler not to have hard quotas. So in light of section 5 being mandatory, I'm okay with, section 7 now being sort of just advisory, in terms of there's no real criteria under section 7 that the city hall staff would apply, because it's just advisory to the extent practicable. So in section 10, the conflict of interest provision, that's always very important. I do have a slight concern that the term "or a personal interest," so a personal interest, since it's not defined, I'm not sure what the definition would be. I certainly wouldn't want somebody with a particular disability wanting a particular kind of accessibility to be said, well, that's a personal interest. So, a person who's blind shouldn't vote on a resolution regarding accessible pedestrian signals or something like that. I don't think that's the intent, but I have a slight concern with just a personal interest not being defined. I don't know if that's really intended to just mean a relationship or financial interest or a relative or something. I'll just finish with section 9, which was my main concern, because if you look at how it's worded,
Is it really?
yes,
That was your 5 minutes.
Okay, I'll just finish and just say section 9 literally says right now that the county of Santa Barbara, that anyone in the county of Santa Barbara, regardless of where they work, can be on this committee. I don't think there's another city committee that is completely open to anyone who lives anywhere in the whole county. If that's the intent, you should probably delete the or full-time employee section, because that's actually broadening it up to let people who work for Amazon or the post office who live in some other state could apply, because it's an or term. So if you're going to open it to the whole county, you can delete the phrase city of Santa Barbara because that's superfluous, and just have it open to the county. And there's no need to have or full-time employees. That's my thought on that. And thank you and good luck. I wish I could, I'll listen to the tape, and I really appreciate the direction this is going in, and I appreciate you giving me all this time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Will. Appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, anyone else comment on different sections?
Shall we continue to entertain public comment? So in the interest of fairness, or withhold that opportunity for later? Is there anyone who wants to public comment at this?
No one else has raised their hand for public comment.
Okay. I want to thank Mr. Railing for his valuable insight and continued participation in this committee. And staff for accommodating him with a little extra time. I don't think we're so pressed for time that it's that big an issue. I know that with city council and 70 or more people trying to comment, that time is really important. But in this venue, when frequently we don't have but one public commenter, I personally am more interested in the valuable insight that the comments can provide than holding them to a time period.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, okay. Anyone else?
And section 2, we're still looking at, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, well, moving along then. Section 3 talks about the city's accessibility compliance staff. Any comments on that?
Whoa.
Should
My
we
only-
continue
my
to
own-
scroll
My only
down?
concern on 3 is I wonder if we might be inadvertently limiting ourselves. Does anybody else share that concern? Is there any other compliance staff that we might want to lump into an or other category? I would hate to think that we overlook something and later find that our hands are tied and we can't advise a certain.
Nick, I know in a previous draft, we talked about responding to a city department according to the specific need of the accessibility issue, or something to that effect. And I think that would help broaden the scope of who we include in whom we advise.
I think this generally covers it, and probably Brian would assure me that if we needed to reach outside, that we could do so through him. So this may be a moot point.
Nick, this is Barbara. Would it suit you better if it said includes but is not limited to the following?
I think I would like that, or may not be limited to, something that gives us a little flexibility in case we've overlooked something.
In case there's a new department formed.
Yeah.
Right, this section, it does say that the committee shall shall serve in an advisory capacity to, and at first it lists the accessibility compliant staff, and then it says as well as all city departments. It's almost as if it would be better if we first said that they're serving in advisory capacity to all city departments, and then it talks about who the accessibility compliant staff
Including,
are.
yeah, just reverse
Yeah.
the wording there. Sure,
I like that.
that makes sense.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Any other comments on section 3? I think 4 and 5 are fairly self-explanatory.
I have a comment on 4 and would like to hear from the other committee members, their opinion on this. Some committees, for example, the Building and Fire Safety Code Board of Appeal does not necessarily have a hard cap of members. We could have a larger pool of members, and then when there's a meeting agendized, we could poll members for availability and settle on the minimum quorum for a meeting. And so I wonder if it's necessary to have this cap. And I think raising the bar is maybe a little, I don't know, wishful thinking, because we have a hard time filling the 7 seats. But
Nick, I like your comment. I wanted to ask Councilman Harmon, in your experience watching other committees, do they deal with a cap on their membership, or how do they deal with that?
Yes, definitely. I mean, I think almost every committee I can think of, they have limitations on number of members. I guess Brian might know better, but all the committees that I liaise to have specific numbers of memberships. It's not open-ended.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Yeah, that's same observations that I've seen. It is interesting, the one that Mr. Kuntz referenced, that Building and Safety Board of Appeals. It's almost like they have a pool of people, and they pull from it as needed when they do a meeting. But I think, I don't know for sure, I haven't been to those meetings, but it seems like those items that they tackle are maybe they're kind of standalone issues, where I think most other boards and committees face things that are kind of long-standing, recurring things. Could be similar at that appeals board as well. I don't know, but
yeah.
I would advise on.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I thought you were done. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I would advise on the hard cap on this one, but it's interesting to see that other one operates differently.
Where it comes in helpful is when there's conflicts in scheduling. So you don't have to reschedule a meeting because you don't have a quorum. That hasn't been a problem for us, so maybe it's okay.
The language that a lot of nonprofits would use, for example, boards or committees, would be something where, in this example, should be comprised of a minimum of 7 persons, not to exceed X number. That could be 11 or 9, but some odd number, obviously, so a vote could be had. But that would be a way to, put both a floor and a ceiling on the numbers, so it is a specific amount within a range. That might give, the latitude when we do have those years where we have multiple applicants to actually have more, or around a specific issue, but that's the only language other than what you have, which I'm perfectly comfortable with. But, in looking to address the question raised, the language there would be a minimum of 7, not to exceed, and then we'd have to determine the number to suggest it.
Problem is we're not meeting that minimum today.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, if nobody has a strong feeling about changing this, I'm happy to let it go. I just wanted to make sure we all thought about it.
Michael, I like your suggestion. It sounds like a possibility of being more open-ended, but I don't know how much trouble we'd get into as far as establishing a quorum and making sure we have enough to have a meeting.
I think we need
Right.
5 as a minimum, right? That's what we've been limping along under. I don't know, if we had all 7 seats filled, it seems unlikely we would run into a situation where more than 2 people were unavailable on a particular date.
It seems like we're trying to solve a problem we haven't had.
Right. Yeah. But as we know, this takes years to get a new iteration, and if I'm looking ahead, but I'm happy to let this go.
And I think we've solved the problem partially by these virtual meetings, that people are more available to meet without having to schedule a time to meet somewhere in person. So thank you, Nick and Michael, both. Are we ready to move on to number 5?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, any questions on number 5 or 6?
I guess 51% to me seems like a minimum. And I'm wondering, where we began with that as the baseline. And also, is this somehow going to work against us at some point and say, oh, we can't have another disabled person? We have too many?
I think it's supposed to act as a minimum. It doesn't say that though. So
Yeah.
we could be more clear with that.
Yeah, I think I'd like to see this clearly stated as a minimum.
I like that, yeah, to make sure that it doesn't put a limit, that it only puts limit on the minimum number.
Yeah.
How would that read?
A minimum of 51%.
Thank you.
It's a funny statistic. It just says that over half the committee should be disabled. Or identify as disabled.
Brian, what do you think? Do we to establish a minimum of 51%, which statistically is more than half, but not limited to that number? If more people, I think we have more than 51% that are disabled now, which is
right, and that's acceptable, and that's great.
Sure.
I mean, the more participation, the better. So I think we could just make the language more clear that we're not looking to simply achieve the minimum. It's just that at least that many committee members.
Maybe just say that the committee shall be comprised of at least 51%. I don't know if I don't have it in front of me, but
At a minimum is the same thing. I think
at a minimum, yeah.
I think if we state the minimum, I think that is adequate to ensure that the majority is of the disabled community.
Yes. Okay. Any other questions? Otherwise, we'll move on to number 6. I think 6 is good just in terms of for city council in your interview of applicants. I think it's helpful in the interview process. I look over that section when I go in for my interviews, when I have done so, and realize, okay, I'm strong in this, and this and this, and I can present that as to city council as a positive thrust for me to, I think I'm qualified to continue serving by relying on these background qualifications. Any other questions on number 6 or number 7?
I had a comment on number 7. The first bullet point, members from the disability community. Could that be members and professionals from the disability community? I'm not sure what just members from the disability community, is that disabled, persons with a disability? Well, we already have 51% of the committee as a minimum has to be them. So who are members from the disability?
Michael, can I comment on that? Because that was something I asked when I first applied to this committee. And I
Yes.
asked city council, what did that mean? And they said to me, that's for you to find out. And so that was my introduction to the disability community. While I might have had a disabled parking placard, I had no idea who the disability community was. And I would say now it's anybody who identifies themselves as part of that.
As a individual with disabilities or professionals working in the,
Who considers themselves in the community. You know how communities are, they're loosely identified. And
Yes.
so when I applied, I had no idea who the disability community was. Now I have a very good idea of who the disability community is. Not that I understand who the individuals are in this town, but I understand the issues facing the disability community. So I don't think that there's any problems of people saying they are part of it when they're not.
Yeah, I agree. I think anybody who has an interest is part of the community.
Well, they can become part. As I said, I wasn't part when I joined this committee. I am a member at large from the community, and I have developed an understanding of the disability community. I certainly would not be identified by anybody in it except for our committee as being part of it.
It is somewhat nebulous, and I wonder how.
I don't think it's a problem.
Yeah. It's seeming a little superfluous at the moment.
And you can see why we decided to drop the number of seats that used to be next to each of these bullet points. There was a number in parentheses. And that made
thank you, Brian.
Which-
Thank you.
That
Which
made
I
it a
think-
lot more confusing.
Which I think is good that you got rid of the numbers.
Yes.
Yes.
I was
agree.
a little bit taken aback when I noticed that, but in light of Mr. Railing's comments about Section 5, it's a lot less concerning. But the wording to the extent practicable, and there's a lot of terminology here that's poorly defined, and maybe adds more confusion than clarity.
Here's what Jim's concern was. He was concerned that when they advertise for openings on these committees, that if we don't have anybody from architectural engineering or building communities, that they should be advertising specifically for such people and not just openings on the committee. But I don't know quite how to resolve that, but that was a concern that he had ongoing.
Yeah. If we're going to define, the makeup here, I definitely think that the architectural engineering and building professionals are helpful, have great insight. I think that, people who work for the various service providers professionally have a lot of insight. I could imagine staff at the Independent Living Resource Center or.
Look at myself as
Right,
president.
exactly.
Hillside,
Exactly.
you
And
know,
so many
which-
others.
But that's the only reason I was thinking maybe we expand and try to clarify that with members and professionals from the disability community. When I
Yeah.
hear disability community, I think the person with disabilities and their family and the caregivers. But
Yeah.
they're not mentioned really anywhere in here, or professionals. And it's just a way to be a little more explicit that members and professionals from the disability community broadens that one of those three categories.
Yeah. And actually, I do see it may be borrowing trouble, maybe worrying about something we haven't come across yet, but I worry that somebody from the downtown business community could come and join and throw a bunch of red flags because of accessibility, seeming to impede their business efforts, and I don't see that as a I mean, obviously it would just be a disturbance if that ever did happen. It may not, but those people's opinions don't really aren't germane to accessibility issues. So the members at large, while that does allow for someone like Barbara, who didn't identify and has been incredibly helpful and
Yes.
interested, I worry that we might leave a door open for somebody who might not be helpful.
Brian, what do you
And,
think?
Yeah, I was just going to say, and it's interesting timing because our council member liaison just jumped off. But to me, in some ways, if you know the council is well connected to the need and the makeup that we have to be successful with this committee, this section almost doesn't even need to be here. Because it's the piece before that, which gets into kind of the things that we're looking for, although some of that is a little bit too much detail. Like if you are somebody who's been dealing with accessibility needs throughout your life, you may not be trained in these specific things that are cited here, but you're going to be a great member of this committee just due to your day-to-day insights. So I think we
That's
all know what we're
interesting.
trying to say in this section.
I think it's a historical carryover. And when I look at the language, it seems like, oh, this is from decades ago.
Yeah, I have a suggestion. I think that what we're really looking to do here is to provide a list of skills that would be helpful to any committee member, right? And so rather than looking at, a category of applicant, we should list the various skill set that any applicant might have that would be helpful in contributing to this committee.
Isn't that list section 6?
Yeah, the skill set is in section 6.
Yes.
But I do think it is appropriate to have, broad categories of,
Yes.
people with background that are germane to the work of AAC.
And I think by eliminating the numbers in front of those 3 categories, doesn't limit us, and like we have to find 2 design professionals or building professionals. I mean, it leaves it open. It could be all members. And I mean, I don't think that that section 7 is harmful or
I
detrimental.
don't think it's harmful at all. I think it's very positive, and I
Yes.
think it provides, kind of the context or the construct of
Yes.
what we want to create with the committee. And again, nowhere in there under the the specifics, skill sets in section 6, or the, categories in section 7 are professionals who work in the disability community. And I just think that is a glaring omission that just with "and professionals" resolves and addresses.
I agree with you, Michael.
Thank you.
So
Barbara.
Michael, you're suggesting add
And
members of
members,
and
members
professionals.
from the disability community.
I like that. I'm comfortable with that because if 6 and 7 are taken together with that added wording, I think it embraces all of what
It also provides a much greater pool of potential applicants when it's defined or delineated specifically.
Question. So is that to read members and or professionals for all 3 items? Yes?
I think number 2 is already implied professionals.
So just for the first one,
I would agree.
I'm thinking, my thought initially was just for the first one. I was kind of noodling around what you just suggested there, but I think that's correct. The second bullet point are defined professionals, and members at large are members at large, not necessarily professionals or not with regard to the disability community. I'm specifically focused on professionals within and from the disability community.
So how would
How about a separate bullet item?
That's what I was thinking.
You could, but I think members and or professionals from disability community covers it. You're not limiting the number of them. It says members plural, and if it's and or that's fine.
Thank you.
Okay, are we ready to move on?
Yes.
Okay, now I have a comment on section 8. Thanks to Barbara, and I know your experience coming onto this committee really inspired this section because I don't think it was well defined before. But this is a new section which, through your inspiration, Barbara, I think we added to this resolution regarding what's the wording, a briefing of an orientation of new committee members regarding the history and scope of the committee. So thank you.
Certainly.
It seems like that sentence about city employees not serving as committee members doesn't really belong in this section, though. I just noticed that.
I think that's an accident. I don't remember that being there before.
Let me see, where are we? Oh, section, need to look at my notes here.
Section
Yeah,
8
yeah, city
from last.
employees may not serve as committee members. Do we? Yeah, that's
Did
sort
that
of
accidentally get
that would-
drugged from the previous section?
Yeah, that's
It would
one
make more
of
sense
those,
in section 7.
one of those editing glitches that our computers do so well. I don't know for you, but for me, they supply things that sometimes were from other documents entirely.
Could fit in 9 as well.
Yeah, I think I like it better at 9.
yes,
So move it to the end of 9.
I think so. Yes.
Thank you.
And is that language okay? May not serve rather than are disallowed from serving? I don't know. I'm kind of being maybe anal on the language here, but I like positive language. But if may not serve is okay with you guys, and we'll go with that.
I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
Okay. So are we okay with 8 and 9?
I have some comments on 9.
Okay.
And Mr. Relling's comments are resonating with me. It's my belief that our intent here was to broaden the scope of potential applicants. But I feel like we may have gone a little too far here, as Will points out. Now, anybody who is an employee of Amazon anywhere in the world qualifies. It was my intent in the city of Santa Barbara, the city limits are pretty small. A lot of people who, I live on a boundary line, one house over, one parcel over, I'm in the county. But if it was my intent that we try to broaden so that there's a couple of people who have expressed interest who happen to live in Lompoc or the San Ynez Valley, and they actually work here in the city of Santa Barbara. They're downtown on a regular basis, so they have a vested interest in accessibility downtown. And I, while I want to broaden the potential pool, I want to limit it to those who have a vested interest. And I think that this is a simple edit to change or full-time employees to and full-time employee of an entity. And maybe it's a little bit more than that. What I'm going for is if you live in the county, but you work in the city regularly, or do business in the city regularly. So I'm not sure how to word that.
I would suggest that, in listening to the comments earlier, it is a very easy fix. And it could be committee members may be residents of the county of Santa Barbara, period. Which eliminate, you get rid of the redundancy because the city of Santa Barbara is in the county of Santa Barbara. That's a redundancy that's just unnecessary. And, I think the comment of full-time employees of an entity doing business within the city, it doesn't belong there because, correct, somebody could be, working in New Jersey with Amazon or Honey, or, pick your, local tech company or go to meetings, log me in. And that's an entity doing business within the city, but that's not who we want on this committee.
Yeah, that's old language from another era.
Well, and also it says may be residents. It doesn't say must. So it doesn't really matter.
Right.
It could be anybody.
Yeah, it is interesting that we have shall in section 8 and shall in section 10, but for some reason this one just says may. It seems like
So
the intent would have been a shall.
Right. It really doesn't mean anything. You could take it out. It really.
Yeah,
way
if the may stays there, the section is kind of pointless.
Yeah. So are we saying that you have to be a resident of the county?
Yes.
I would think so, yes.
So then we say must instead of may.
Or shall.
Mhm.
Shall.
Yeah.
But I think it ends at County of Santa Barbara. I don't think or full-time employees, it serves no purpose.
I think you're right. And the reason being, when they have to apply and go to council and make the case for why they're qualified to be on this, if they live in the county and they never visit the city, that's going to come out and they're not going to be a highly qualified candidate. So I think it simplifies everything to just go down to the county, broaden it to the county level and not get into this doing business or not. I think the idea was before we said county, maybe you had somebody who lived in Goleta, but they spent their whole day every day downtown because they worked for a business doing business here. But by the language that we have now, right, the Amazon thing comes in, or people who don't even commute, but their business is located here would be eligible based on the way this is written.
Well,
and that's not
what
the
about
intent
people
was.
who live in Ventura and work here?
Wrong county.
Long County.
They should be on the Access Advisory Committee for the city of Ventura.
Right. I agree with that.
And
They can certainly give public comment and
that's what I was saying. They can
participate.
call in during any meeting and provide public comment.
Yeah.
Certainly.
They're not, prohibited from participating in the process, just serving on this particular committee.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
So
I
there
was looking to, and I think that the suggested edit, change may to shall and end it after County of Santa Barbara, striking city. I think that solves everything too.
Okay.
Good. Any other? Thank you, guys. Is that all on number 9?
There's
Yeah.
nothing left of number 9.
Okay.
Sarita, are you clear on how that's going to read now?
Committee members shall be residents of the County of Santa Barbara.
Yep.
Or full-time employees.
No.
Nope.
No, just period.
Period. And then city employees may not serve as committee members.
Exactly.
All right. I was just looking at the original resolution.
Yeah.
With that language.
I think that simplifies
Yeah,
and
that is-
clarifies it both. Okay. Brian and Sarita, I have a question. Rachel, Raquel, a question on number 10. I think it's mandatory. It's something legally that I think has to be in the resolution. I have just a language question. I'm wondering if recuse is a better word than qualify. I mean, disqualify.
Seems synonymous to me.
That is actually
That's the more,
that's the language from the original.
Resolution. Yes.
Mhm.
disqualify is
Yes,
that,
yes. I just pulled it up.
but recuse is the more typical terminology we hear with public boards and committees. So
I've
I
heard
think that's
that.
a good change.
Good. Yeah, that was my recommendation. It sounds like a word that's used more often in terms of when I hear a person saying, I recuse myself of this discussion because of whatever their reason is.
Agreed.
So that was my only comment on number 10. Does anyone else have a comment?
The only thing I have to say in addition is that this does kind of address my concern that some outsider might come in and be disruptive. The only kind of person I could see doing that was somebody with a business interest that was conflicting with accessibility. So
Right.
yeah.
Well, Will had that issue about personal interest, thinking that it was vague. I don't have a problem, but I do want to remind you that he brought it up.
I would suggest that we delete "or a person of interest" and it just read in a committee decision which would affect independence of judgment. You know, especially given the comments we heard earlier. I would just delete that "or a personal interest."
Yeah, that should do it.
Thank you, Marcus. Yeah. Okay. Is that okay with you, Brian?
Yeah, I think so. We'll want to run that by the attorney's office, but I think whatever we come up with, I think will be better than what we're looking at today, which is a very, just
Awkward.
personal interest is not very clear. I mean, we all have personal interests.
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't.
But
be
then
here.
there's this other statement that affects your independence of judgment. I think that's more what this is aiming to get at.
Okay.
I was surprised when he brought it up, but as soon as he did, then I saw, oh yes, this is the problem.
Do we have some canine input here? Or did I hear?
That's my dog.
I love it. Yeah. Okay.
That was a vote in favor.
Are we okay with number 10?
Yeah, if we're going to delete "or a personal interest," then I think yes.
Yes. I agree.
And we're going to change disqualify to
recuse, yes. And if we're moving on, I wanted to thank Brian for helping clarify the language in number 11. I think it's clearer than it was.
Yeah,
Oh,
this
it's
is
a
tough one.
wonderful improvement.
I remember we struggled with this for quite some time.
We could never have imagined how good this could be.
So there's no limit now in terms of how long you can serve.
There is a limit, but the language is that you can continue to serve until you're replaced. And that's why I'm still around, because nobody has replaced me.
Right.
Okay, okay.
She's irreplaceable.
So I think if we're okay with number 11, I think number 12 is mandatory. I think that's in all committees. It's just a given. Any questions on 13?
How am I still here? Sorry.
Here, any questions on 13? Going once? Going twice. 14, Barbara, you had a question. You said something about 2 committee members. I wanted you to elaborate on that.
There was a backslash on an earlier version, request of /2, and that's already.
Yeah, and Sarita took care of it. It's not here anymore.
It's
Oh,
already.
okay. So it was just a typo?
Yes.
Oh, okay, good. Okay. Any other
It was
questions?
one of those things that the system provided. I'm sure Sarita never typed it in.
Okay. Any more questions on 14? Okay, moving on to 15, and I think this was the last bridge to cross.
Yeah, and I know there'll be some discussion here, and the language that's in front of you today was something that I had worked on with the aim of providing the most flexibility, where I put in this section at the request of the ADA coordinator or the AC chair. Special meetings may be scheduled in addition to the regular quarterly meetings, but I'm open to discussion on this. This is just what I felt like maybe would give us the maximum flexibility.
Brian, this is Bob. I was thinking of 2 things. Number 1, if we can continue to meet virtually, that's 1 plus. And secondly, if we increase it to 6 meetings a year, providing that we devise shorter agendae, is that something that might be workable with staff? Those 2 elements.
Well, yeah, and that's, I think we would certainly want to have shorter meetings if we had more meetings.
Absolutely.
Some of them have been some marathons that go into the lunch hour, and those are taxing days for the staff, especially there's staff that do a lot of work in preparation for those, and they're working behind the scenes with these virtual meetings. So shorter would definitely be better.
For all of us.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm in favor of shorter, more frequent meetings. And I was really intrigued by your suggestion, Brian, at our last subcommittee meeting of 6 times a year. Every other month seems really doable. It's only adding 2 more to the calendar year.
Right.
And if we don't have anything to talk about, we can always, postpone or cancel a meeting. Or it could just be a quick 1 agenda item, and we'd all be back to our lives quickly.
That's what today is kind of an example of that. This is a special meeting, one
Yes,
item. We're beyond an hour, but I think we're wrapping up here shortly.
We're almost at the end.
It's a pretty big item.
All of you have had
Yeah.
such good input, and I really appreciate everybody weighing in on some of the stuff and clarifying some language.
Personally, for me, I'd rather see us hold it to quarterly meetings, just given what my workload and availability is. And obviously, I'd love them to be, shorter and more focused. That doesn't seem like the right combination. But I'd rather have 4 regular meetings and they take what they take than add more meetings to an already pretty full calendar. That's just whatever the group decides, I'll do and do happily. But my preference would be to stay on quarterly meetings.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate you.
And again, if I'm the only one, the rule of the committee will rule.
I fear that you may be an outlier on this one, at least from committee members.
Which is fine, and that's fine. I completely accept that, and just wanted to put it out there because that's what I'm sitting here feeling.
I know.
Excuse me. My feeling was that I was okay with quarterly as long as we could call special meetings, and that now that we have active ad hoc committee, they are pretty effective. And so I didn't feel the need for every other month, which I did previously when we seemed to be so mired in I don't know what, but unable to act. What I said to City Council when I applied the last time is that meeting quarterly as an advisory committee, given the Brown Act, we're really unable to do anything, because anything that we were to respond to is going to take at least 3 months till we met again and decided. So I thought that quarterly was kind of unworkable as an advisory committee.
Well, how about this, folks? If we do quarterly meetings, I think it's up to the chair and the vice chair to really discuss agenda further ahead of time, so we can work with Brian and figure out an agenda that's maybe more workable, maybe shorter already than these 2-hour meetings we've been having, and then try to prioritize, okay, what's time sensitive, what's most important, and then have, if there are more agenda items that we have on our docket, then delegate those to an ad hoc committee or subcommittee to meet. And as long as, Brian, you're okay with these meetings, meeting virtually, it seems like there's more time flexibility there. That might be workable. I just wanted your guys' opinion on that.
I agree. I think that we're getting more efficient in our ad hoc committees, and for a long time I felt like we were not meeting enough. There was too much to do and we weren't getting anywhere.
Yeah.
And now I'm starting to see a shift there, and I guess it took me, at least me, and maybe others, some time to work into a groove or a routine that makes these ad hoc committees more effective. We've always had the ability. So I guess something to keep in mind down the road, not really need to address in this draft resolution, but if we had some way to have some institutional knowledge to pass forward in helping future committee members keep the effectiveness of ad hoc subcommittees or
Nick, I'm going to interrupt you to say the big difference is having Brian, who's so cooperative, and that's such a change. And about ad hoc committees, what I noticed joining this committee is, I would say that the disability community particularly has less experience serving on committees, perhaps, than me as a member of the general public. And it isn't that it wasn't available, it's just people didn't have experience doing it. So I was the one pushing Jim with the ad hoc committee. So that's just the history of that.
Mm-hmm. Well, and yeah, maybe we can look at ways to keep that in focus for new people moving forward. When we're gone, it took me quite a long time to get up to speed, and I have some experience working with committees, but
So
yeah, it's a little different working with the city as opposed to the business community.
So Brian and Sarita and Raquel, I think I'm okay with the current language in number 15. I think aside from, well, hopefully not bombarding you with emails and phone calls in between meetings, I think we can still be more agenda attentive further in advance from the next meeting to really zero in on what items we need to discuss that are time sensitive, what items are maybe a further layer back that might need an ad hoc committee or subcommittee, and like Barbara and Nick both said, just to be more efficient. That we can do stuff in between meetings in correspondence to
Bob, one
yes.
of the problems has been the Brown Act and how much we can do behind the scenes. That's been something that Jim has been very sensitive to, and Brian too. So that has to be mentioned in this discussion. That we as a committee as a whole can only talk to each other at committee meetings.
What's your take on this, Brian?
Well, yeah, I mean, I drafted this latest version of this section. Like I said earlier, I think it provides us the most flexibility. I think for it to be effective, it will be really important that I have probably a regularly scheduled check-in with the chair. And maybe that's a quarterly, it might only take 15 minutes sometimes, but just kind of a regular check-in on things that are going on, where we have like a standing list of items. And if there's anything that we feel like is kind of risen up to the top and needs special attention before the quarterly meeting, then in that, I'm thinking maybe a monthly check-in, we could decide. And again, there's Brown Act, but the chair probably will have had some discussion with another member or two, and we'll have a sense if the chair has been hearing from the committee or just from the community in general, that there's some issues that are sort of rising up. We can get that on an agenda for a special meeting rather than wait for the quarterly meeting. But without those check-ins, I think we'll kind of be chasing, in a way, the issues. Something will come up and we'll feel like we need to schedule a special meeting, but the council meeting is on Tuesday, so it's too late to do the special meeting. So trying to stay ahead of those issues so that we can meet as a full committee and have a discussion. That's where I think this quarterly check-in, monthly check-in between myself and the chair might be an effective tool.
Okay.
And that's not something that needs to go in this resolution, but that's something that I would want to do.
Okay. Any other questions or discussion on number 15?
Well, I have one last thing to say then after Brian's comment, and that is, if we know there's going to be a monthly check-in, then we know if we have concerns to get them to the chairman ahead of that monthly check-in.
Perfect. Yes.
Yes. Thanks, Barbara. Okay. I think the last three sections are fairly self-explanatory. Does anyone have any comments or questions? If not, Brian, what is your what is your pleasure as far as, do we need a motion from this committee to approve or recommend this draft be forwarded on to you and staff and city council?
Yeah, I mean, I guess at this point, the motion's going to be, I mean, we can't get into the specifics or it would take a half an hour to put it together, but I think you could say as approve the resolution as presented and per the revisions that were discussed today. And what I think we can do, Sarita and I can work on the edits and we'll put them in a red line format so you can see what changed. And we can kick that back to the ad hoc, to that subcommittee that's been working on this to make sure that we think we've got it ironed out correctly. And then that'll be the version that we can share again with the whole committee. If there's any like final cleanup that comes out of the ad hoc, we can take that to the next quarterly meeting. And hopefully it's just going to be a 5-minute item. That we get the blessing there, then it'll go to council the first meeting.
Oh, thank goodness.
So agendize this then for the August 13 meeting. As a 5-minute discussion for final approval.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Beautiful.
So do we need a
however
motion?
somebody wants to package that into a motion
I
would
don't
be
think
good.
we
I
need
think
to
You
do
need a
anything
motion.
more.
You do need a motion, a second, and a vote.
So I'll make a motion to recommend approval of the resolution as presented with revisions discussed and approved today, July 21st, 2021.
A second.
Very good. Any further discussion? Okay, Sarita, go ahead. The roll call.
Mr. Burnham,
Aye.
Mr. Coons,
Aye.
Mr. Rassler,
Aye.
Ms. Silver,
Aye.
Ms. Tejada. Ms. Tejada.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion has passed.
Thank you very much, all of you, for your time today and going through some real discussion on several points of this. Again, it's a work in progress. And I think it's a major improvement from resolution 08095. And I'm confident that when Brian and staff present this to city council, it'll pass. Like Brian said, there might be some questions for the city attorney's office, but I'm sure you'll follow through on those.
Well, Bob, thank you for your hard work from beginning to end, at the beginning being quite a long time ago.
Indeed.
Thank you. Well, it's, all of you have weighed in on some really important stuff that I missed. So it's really been a collective effort. And I thank all of you for doing this with me.
All right. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I second.
Aye.
Yeah,
Aye.
goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Sarita, Raquel,
Thanks,
Brian,
everyone.
thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you, everybody.